So how significant is this meeting between Netanyahu and Trump today in this 21-point peace plan? And how significant is this idea that he would grant an amnesty for Hamas?
This is crunch time. Israel wants to end the war, the longest war in Israel's history, and it wants to end the war by bringing all the hostages home and removing Hamas from power so it can never start another war ever again. And so really this is a make or break moment where Hamas will be put under pressure to lay down its arms, to free those hostages all in one go, and finally put this war behind us. President Trump is presenting a 21-point plan, and that plan basically says either Hamas will dismantle itself or Israel will continue going through the Gaza Strip, dismantling Hamas, taking it apart, and handing it over to some transnational authority that will run the Gaza Strip. Some people talking about Tony Blair.
Yeah. Exactly, we were just saying. But there's been this talk, well, OK, anyone can run it. You just can't be Hamas or Fatah or the Iranians. It can't be anyone who poses a threat. Does anyone really want it? I mean, that's the reality, is there's a reason why Egypt hasn't opened its very large border with Gaza. They don't want the Palestinian people. The Jordanians don't want any more. The Saudis don't want any more. No one actually wants these people because they've been so radicalised over the last goodness knows how many years of having Hamas in charge of them. So does anyone really want that job?
Well, and that's the horrible truth. No one really wants to govern the Gaza Strip, at least not in a way that commits it to a future of peace next to its
Well, Israel didn't want to. Israel walked away 20 years ago.
Well, exactly. Israel withdrew from the Gaza Strip 20 years ago and got back rockets on Tel Aviv and the death squads of October 7th who burned families alive in their homes and took hostages into Gaza. And now that we're seeing a lot of pressure on Israel to withdraw from the West Bank as well, Israelis are saying, hang on, how can you guarantee that the same thing that happened in Gaza won't happen in the West Bank on a much larger scale? Yeah. And the real challenge, therefore, after this war, if it ends soon, is going to be how do you transform Gaza from being one big launch pad for attacks against Israel into a peaceful entity that is at peace with its neighbor Israel and isn't committed to more jihad against it.
And that's the thing. It's all very well, and we've had a heckle at Labour Party conference with a pro-Palestinian activist saying, oh, Israel committing genocide, mass starvation in Gaza for 2 years. Again, both complete lies. Provably complete lies, but not that stops the government from recognising a Palestinian state on the basis of those lies. But there's been no conditions at all on Hamas in terms of what they had to do, in terms of releasing the hostages. I mean, we're talking bare-sodding minimum at this point, let alone laying down their arms. But realistically, can Netanyahu actually succeed in his aim? And we've given that there's quite a lot of criticism even from leaders of the IDF and many even in his own government, succeed in his aim of completely destroying Hamas. He's taken out pretty much all the leadership in Gaza. He's taken out the leadership in Qatar. He's taken out the people who've been funding it in lots of ways and their ability to arm them in Iran. He's taken out, Hezbollah's, a lot of their rockets and their leadership. Realistically, has he kind of achieved all he can achieve other than getting the hostages out?
And now is crunch time for the world to tell Hamas it's game over. You have to lay down your arms, free the hostages, and end this war. The tragedy is that international pressure on Israel to end the war is giving Hamas every incentive to continue the war.
Yeah.
I mean, Hamas's leaders are calling the recognition of a non-existent Palestinian state a fruit of October 7th. They're doubling down. Razi Ahmed told CNN this weekend that the condemnation of Israel is one of the benefits of October 7th. Yeah. Hamas feels that it's vindicated. And that's why now what we need to see is pressure on Hamas's state sponsors. Chief among them, Qatar. Yeah. Julia, Qatar is the biggest landowner in London. It owns more land than the Crown. It owns the Shard. It has a massive share in Sainsbury's and in Heathrow Airport as well, and Claridge's. We need pressure on them, on the Islamist dictatorship, backing Hamas to tell it the whole world is saying you have to let go. This war has to end.
It is absolutely extraordinary that, we've got America and the world was happy to go into Afghanistan for sheltering of the Al-Qaeda network and Osama bin Laden when they launched the 9/11 attack on New York and the Pentagon. But we're happy to just play nicey with the Qataris as they've been harbouring the leaders of Hamas who launched that attack on our only democratic ally in the Middle East of Israel. And again, you and I have discussed this many times. It is extraordinary that these, whether it's Keir Starmer or Macron or anyone else, all these people who are telling the Israelis they need to live side by side with people who have vowed to completely and utterly annihilate them, and who has celebrated the not just a terror attack, but the most vile, foul invasion and I mean, rape, murder, mutilation, the most horrific events on October the 7th, which some people are still denying, despite all of the evidence that it happened. And someone who's been to those sites, my God, it's very clear it happened. But the West is still requiring that Israel does something which no other government in the world would ever agree to do.
Yeah, Julia, I think the British and French government's behaviour has been shameful because they've essentially been pressuring Israel to end this war with the jihadi regime that started this war still in power, just a few hundred meters away from people's homes. Let's be clear what happens if this war ends with hostages still in Gaza and Hamas still in power. If this is not the last Gaza war, there will be a next Gaza war because Hamas will never stop until it succeeds in its goal of destroying Israel. You know, Julia, you visited the site of the massacre, and people make a mistake when they look at October 7th and think that it was just a terror attack. It wasn't. It was the opening shot of what was meant to be a regional war of annihilation against Israel with all of Iran's proxies. Hezbollah from Lebanon, the Houthis from Yemen, the Iranian regime itself. And Hamas mistimed it, it failed. But that is what Hamas was planning on October 7th.
Let's not ignore that reality. What did you make, just finally, of the speech that your Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu gave at the UN? And we had this very sort of, you know, staged walkout. Loads of people went into that UN Assembly Hall who wouldn't normally be there, so they could very openly leave. And, oh, look, you know, he's the genocidal leader of Israel, and we're all walking out because we're so moral. What did you make of that, given that they don't seem to feel that way about pretty much any of the genuinely genocidal dictators who they happily sit and listen to and applaud?
Yeah, let's remember, most countries in the United Nations are not democracies. Most of them are autocracies, dictatorships of one form or another. And I think we all make a mistake when we attach any moral authority to the United Nations. I saw that, you know, many diplomats from mostly Islamic nations walked out of Netanyahu's speech. It didn't impress me. It's something they do every single year. And they did it where the United Nations, which was meant to be a place where we actually sit and listen to alternative points of view and to other world leaders and try to solve things through dialogue. And so walking out in this sort of petulant hissy fit is not only rude, it just undermines the values of the United Nations that they claim to support. Frankly, it's pathetic.
I couldn't agree with you more. Eylon Levy, great to talk to you, former Israeli government spokesman, host of Israel State of a Nation podcast.